Hello, everyone, and thank you for organizing this. It's particularly pertinent this morning. My colleague Tabang is, for example, not able to join today, even though we have created a Wi-Fi hotspot, because the government has cut all the cables to the community and pulled the cables out so that the community can't reconnect. And so by creating this hotspot, it had created this amazing access for people. And now it's just gone. And, it's the new political party and their efforts to quote unquote clean up the city from people who aren't paying for infrastructure. And, it's just had such impact in so many ways. And almost every time I talk with him, he's working on trying to get the electricity reconnected, and people are, somebody died trying to get the electricity reconnected. And it's just, it's just inhuman, really, what they've done with this. So, and this is in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Oh, thank you. I was going to ask, but wow, so the situation is very close to home for me, that I'm based in Cape Town in South Africa, but and it's quite incredible that yes, even within the same country, I'm not even aware of the situation, but yes, very serious. But thank you for sharing that. And
I just wanted to add too that people, they came with the army to do this, and even people in Johannesburg I know don't know that it's happened. So it's been done very quietly. And so it's actually quite frightening.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, thank you for sharing the story. And yes, we hope that it can be changed and addressed, but it is quite challenging and especially scary and dangerous, no, for those so close to it.
Exactly.
So yes, thank you. I also saw that Mariama has mentioned have a strong local leader who can inspire team members to work together on common challenges. Mariama, would you like to share something with us to tell us a little bit more about this magical power, how it would make a difference?
Thank you for giving me the floor. So for me, if we talk about the local lead, we need to identify the local issue and also have a great leader or a strong leader that can drive. Because for me, most of the time, if you want to find a solution or if you want to bring a solution, it is more powerful if you have the bottom-down approach than the up-down approach. And if the things are coming from the community, we can make more impact and we can touch the real situation and bring a powerful solution for the communities. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I think that is very true, that we need these like leaders that can inspire and really lead to solutions from the bottom. So thank you for sharing that. And maybe Anna, would you like to share from your side?
Yes, I've just shared two images because I feel maybe you want to read it later. It's a bit complicated. These diagrams give an overview of the entire thing. It's called Authentic Dialogue. It's an idea by an author called Choi, and it would really be a superpower because, well, in the field that I'm researching in, we regard informal settlers, so they fall outside the formal planning framework, but often they carry actually the most vulnerability to climate change. So in order to have the indigenous efforts of locally led action for climate change adaptation work together with, well, the formal government-led climate change adaptation projects, maybe also those building with nature-based solutions, I think what we really need is the authentic dialogue, because then it's not just about formal rules and we just simply look what are the social goals, where do we find the solution that is actually beneficial to everyone, including informal settlers.
Great, thank you. Yes, something very important, no? The way we communicate, is it inclusive, and are we really getting to the truth of the matter? I think that's a very important point. Fahad, I see that you have your hand up. Maybe you're also encouraging me to move on.
And I just wanted to make a quick request to everyone that for the convenience of our interpreter, if if someone has strong internet, it would be good if you turn on your camera. That would be helpful for our interpreter. Thank you.
Great. So we should keep it off as much as possible. Okay, let me do that. And
No. You can keep it off, but when you're speaking, it
okay.
would be good if you turn on. That will help our interpreter. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, so with that, I think it's been very nice to hear from some of you, and I hope that you will keep sharing your experiences and stories in the rest of the session. This was just a very quick way to check in, and I will now pass on to Mary, who will tell us what will happen and what we are expecting from today.
Thanks very much, Lucia, and welcome again from me, everyone. So, Fahad, would you mind sharing the screen, the slides that we had prepared about the objectives? Thanks very much.
Sure.
So, thank you. So the objectives of today's session are to share some stories of climate resilience at the local level. So we're actually going to hear directly from some of the authors of the Voices from the Frontline stories who worked with CDKN and ICCCAD on writing up, on documenting these compounding shocks in 2020 and 2021. And this will cover some of the successes in community organising and also failed attempts, and endeavour to understand various enabling and hindering factors for community resilience. And you'll definitely have a chance to ask questions of the speakers if you wish. Then we're going to have some breakout discussion to speak among ourselves in small groups about developing strategies for engaging with the COP27 preparatory process by developing messages which you as community-based organisations and researchers would like to be shared with decision makers in the run-up to and at COP27. That's really the meat of the agenda. If there's interest and if we have time at the end, we're also interested to put on the table a discussion of whether community-based organisations, Voices from the Frontline authors, would like to create some kind of community of practice or network to continue to connect with each other and indeed with climate-related funding. Next slide, please. So just a bit about how we might take key messages to the COP27 decision makers and engage with them. Sorry, could you advance to the next slide, Fahad? Thank you. Well, who are these COP27 decision makers? They are, of course, the country delegations and the conference as a whole, including its subsidiary bodies like the Scientific and Technological Advice and subsidiary body for implementation, and the UNFCCC Secretariat, and also the presidencies of the COP that has just happened, the Conference of the Parties that just happened in Glasgow in November, which was hosted by the UK with Italy, and the COP27 presidency, of course, itself is with Egypt. And key moments in the preparatory process would be the 6th to the 16th of June this year, when the so-called SB 56 meetings will happen, also known as the Bonn Climate Conference. That's what you will find it listed as on the UNFCCC website. And these, of course, are the technical meetings in Bonn where the COP27 agenda will be decided. So that is a key moment for influence. And then COP27 itself is from the 7th to the 18th of November in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Next slide, please. And when we get to our discussion together, it would be really good to hear from all of you with all of your experience about how you think this group can engage with COP27 decision makers and be influential. And some of you are already doing all kinds of influencing and advocacy work. but just some ideas to put out there are that some of the messages that we developed together could be woven into statements of some of the constituencies in the UNFCCC processes. Those are the formal constituency groups which are registered with the UNFCCC, like the farmers and the gender constituency, in which some members of this group already take part. I think speaking from CDKN side, there's definitely an opportunity to influence the sort of mood music around both the technical sessions in June and the run up to and at COP27 itself by capturing various statements and sentiments from community-based organizations through articles, videos, and social media campaigns targeted to the channels and the places that UNFCCC delegates are reading and viewing. So CDKN is definitely up for helping you to contribute to that mood music. And there could also be various ad hoc opportunities for hosting roundtables or convening with officials, including at national level, or even potentially this group could think about, organizing a side event at COP27 itself. So those are just some ideas to give you a flavor of what we hope to discuss today. But that's it from me. Over to you again, Lucia, to introduce the speakers, I think.
I will pass straight on to Zakir, and Zakir is going to be moderating the rest of the session, or most of it. So Zakir, I don't know if you would like to introduce yourself and yes, take us through the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, Fahad, and Lucia. For the boys from the front line, we are in a crucial moment to put the voices, put the struggles, into next phase, so that they could find a way to upload their experiences, upload their struggle results into policy process up to COP27 at least. At this moment, I would like to invite 4 speakers. Those are the heroes of local level who are struggling at the local level to solve the global problem. They will come up with their struggle, the success and failure. So failure is also a result. So they will come up with a climatic problem, social problem, financial problem, and even the authoritarian problem they are facing each of the moment of their struggle. At this moment, I would like to invite Maria Eugenia of Tezendo Claudides of Bolivia. Maria, please, the floor is yours.
Buenos días, gracias, Zakir. Debo aclararles que en realidad no represento a la organización Tejiendo Ciudades. Yo trabajo para la organización Tejiendo Ciudades. Ellas no han podido asistir, ni las representantes ni miembros de base, porque hoy día es miércoles y las mujeres que trabajan en la organización o son lideresas también se dedican al comercio informal. Entonces, hoy día es día de feria de mercado. Entonces, es un día muy importante para ellas, ¿no? Entonces, yo trabajo con ellas hace muchísimos años. Entonces, me han pedido que exponga un poco su historia, que les comparta su historia, cómo se empezó y dónde están ahora. Pues yo soy socióloga urbana y soy abogada, y en realidad no se puede entender el proceso de Tejiendo Ciudades si no se conoce un poco sus inicios, ¿no? Entonces, quiero ubicarles sus inicios, hasta dónde estamos ahora, ¿no? Como organización, Tejiendo Ciudades se forma hace 13 años. Sin embargo, su historia es muchísimo más larga. Nace de la reunión de mujeres que eran líderes de sus barrios, líderes de asentamientos informales, pero en el conjunto del liderazgo vecinal, las mujeres eran muy pocas, ¿no? Entonces era necesario hacer un grupo separado de los varones para hablar sobre los problemas que tenían las mujeres lideresas. Debo por lo menos ubicarles sobre qué país estoy hablando, mil disculpas. Soy de Bolivia, la experiencia es boliviana, y como ustedes saben, y para los que no saben, Bolivia tiene una característica muy particular, es un país con poca población, 10 millones de habitantes, donde lo más estable es la inestabilidad. Es un país lamentablemente muy pobre, que vive de la minería. Entonces, esas son las condiciones estructurales, digamos, de la participación de las mujeres líderes de barrios y de asentamientos. Entonces, este grupo de mujeres empieza a reunirse, perdón, voy a ver la hora. Entonces, empieza a reunirse y empiezan a discutir cuáles son los problemas que les afectan, que les preocupan, y sobre su propia representación. Encontraron que las lideresas, primero que eran jefas de hogar, ¿no? Eran jefas de hogar, eran las que habían tenido acceso a educación primaria y que realmente eran muy pocas, no solamente en una ciudad, en todas las ciudades del país. Entonces, que había que pensar el liderazgo de las mujeres de manera separada a la de los varones. Y había una preocupación central para ellas, que era el acceso a la vivienda y a la propiedad. Como grupo, era el tema que les unía, el tema de la vivienda, el tema de asegurar la tenencia y el tema de que el Estado no tenía ninguna política sobre el acceso a la vivienda. En ese momento, fundacional, se empieza a discutir sobre el derecho a la vivienda, ¿no? El derecho a la vivienda y sobre la importancia de la función social y ambiental de la propiedad, ¿no? Entonces, los derechos humanos empiezan a tener sentido para las mujeres ligados al territorio, ¿no? Gran parte de las mujeres apenas resuelven sus necesidades básicas. Es imposible pensar que pasan a las necesidades estratégicas o se involucran en actividades estratégicas porque resuelven apenas la alimentación y el liderazgo, ¿no? Entonces, estamos en un contexto donde es muy difícil ser lideresa. Pero además, pensar sobre los derechos humanos ligados al territorio, a la complejidad del territorio, ¿no? Entonces, este momento fundacional digamos, para ver los inicios, tiene que ver con esto, ¿no? O sea, los derechos y los conflictos territoriales, ¿no? Entonces, hay un segundo momento en la organización y claro, ya ellas empiezan a desarrollar algunas herramientas para ver cómo van a enfrentar el tema de la vivienda, el tema de la tierra. Entonces, hacen lo que nosotros llamamos en idioma originario pasanacu, ¿no? Que quiere decir en el camino, ¿no? Es quechua, uno de nuestros idiomas originarios, en el camino. Entonces, la pregunta y el desafío era, ¿nos ayudaremos? ¿Cómo podemos ayudarnos? Entonces, no solamente las lideresas, sino todas las mujeres que estaban involucradas de estos barrios, empiezan a recolectar dinero. Entonces se ayudaban entre ellas recolectando una vez para una y la otra vez para la otra, ¿no? Entonces ese Pasanacu aquí es un sistema de financiamiento solidario que tiene una larguísima data, ¿no? En ese momento es que conocimos una experiencia muy similar a la nuestra, que seguramente la mayoría de ustedes conocen, que es la experiencia de Slum Dwellers International, el SDI. Entonces, un compañero de la universidad me dice, lo que hacen en Bolivia es muy, muy similar a experiencias en África y Asia. Entonces, él nos vinculó con el SDI. Entonces, y aprendimos del SDI en este segundo momento de la historia de la organización, de que teníamos una idea del financiamiento, pero que la forma en la que hacían era muy diferente y que podíamos repensar el ahorro tal cual hacía el SDI e incluimos la metodología de trabajo del SDI a la organización. Eso es lo que se llama el segundo momento de la organización. Entonces empezamos a desarrollar el ahorro comunitario, el acceso a la información. El acceso a la información y el poder como espacio de transformación. Entonces, las mujeres en este momento, en el minuto que me queda, han desarrollado estrategias de sostenibilidad con autonomía, con autodeterminación, y en realidad el manejo del COVID ha tenido que ver con la sobrevivencia, que es lo que nosotros presentamos en el artículo, ¿no? No tiene que ver con la enfermedad en sí misma, sino con la falta de recursos institucionales, económicos y de todo tipo, ¿no? Entonces, el desafío es cómo resolver necesidades materiales todavía, como es el tema de la alimentación, y en eso se está buscando estrategias para resolver, por ejemplo, los huertos comunitarios, cómo resolver problemas de alimentación, cosas básicas, acceso al agua, ¿no? Entonces, en este momento estamos. Mil gracias. Creo que era importante situarles en la historia para entender la historia de la organización.
Thank you, Maria, for your excellent presentation about organizing women and empower them to have the land rights that we lack in most of the developing countries. And so it is not a story of Bolivia alone, but it is the story of most of the least development countries. Where women are suppressed, they don't have land rights. Even I can say in Bangladesh, women are not a farmer legally. So thank you very much. Now I request Jody Sanchez Beltran of Puertopia in Colombia. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Ok, muchas gracias. Buenos días para todos y todas. Soy Jody de Huertopía. Huertopía es una palabra compuesta por dos palabras. Huerto, de siembra, y utopía, que es lo que nos hace caminar hacia la transformación del planeta. Bueno, para precisar allí la pronunciación. Huertopía, y mi nombre es Jody. De Colombia, Bogotá, Colombia. Para ser breve, quiero comentarles que nosotros en la pandemia realizamos varias estrategias para solucionar la demanda de alimentos, dado que el gobierno en ese momento no tenía estrategias para la alimentación de las personas, simplemente nos encerraron sin garantías de alimentos, pero el costo de vida seguía manteniéndose, el alimento subió, los servicios públicos subieron. Entonces, desde los procesos territoriales que hay acá, nosotros como uno de ellos, impulsamos la creación de huertas en áreas baldías. Nosotros trabajamos en barrios informales, ¿sí? En el borde de la ciudad, barrios que no son reconocidos, como lo mencionaban ahora, creo que era Ana. También somos más vulnerables, fuimos más vulnerables ante la COVID-19. Entonces, al estar ubicados en la periferia y al no tener garantías de alimentación, pues lo que se hizo fue implementar una estrategia que se llamó Contágiate de la siembra. Contágiate de la siembra consistió en impulsar ejercicios de, digamos, toma de terrenos baldíos para sembrar, para crear nuevas huertas que posibilitaran la generación de alimento en un área pues muy reducida, pero que quedara cercana y que eso ayudara especialmente a fortalecer el sistema inmune con plantas medicinales como las aromáticas, también que permitiera el encuentro de las personas en un espacio abierto, pero que permitiera el encuentro porque eso favorecía la salud mental de las personas y pues además para el encuentro, para ver qué soluciones, además de la alimentación, podrían gestarse desde allí. Entonces, a raíz del encuentro en la huerta, lo que surgió fue la idea de crear una red de economía popular y solidaria en el territorio Alto Fucha, que es donde nos ubicamos. Allí lo que se hizo fue que varias mujeres, cada una de las vecinas, como el hombre suele ser el proveedor del hogar, eh, en ese momento pues estaba cerrado todo, no podían trabajar, entonces las mujeres desde sus saberes, desde sus conocimientos propios, empezaron algunas a tejer, algunas a elaborar mermeladas, a hacer, sí, transformación de alimentos sobre todo, y a venderlos a través de la red. Entonces creamos una plataforma en Facebook, la pueden encontrar ahora y chequearla, y allí se promocionaban los productos de las mujeres. Eso estaba conformado únicamente por las mujeres como una estrategia para aportar al hogar. Entonces, en paralelo iba la creación de huertas y la red de economía popular y solidaria. Bajo esas dos líneas nos enfocamos y fue una oportunidad para encontrarnos y empezar a tejer otro tipo de relaciones más desde la autogestión. Todo esto pues, fue gestado desde la comunidad, desde las voluntades, porque no hay financiación pues, de ningún tipo. Todo lo hacíamos como de manera voluntaria. eh, y poco a poco fue tomando más fuerza, sobre todo la red y las huertas, pasando de tener 5 huertas a tener casi 30 huertas únicamente en el área donde trabajamos. Pero en toda Bogotá, la expansión de huertas urbanas es un ejercicio que logró cohesionar muchísimo a la comunidad. Aparte, pues que se transforman los residuos sólidos a través de las pacas biodigestoras. No sé si las conocen, si no, pueden buscar en YouTube pacas biodigestoras y es una excelente manera de obtener abono, mucho abono en un tiempo, digamos, relativamente corto y además sembrar encima mientras eso se
You have 1
transforma.
minute, please, Jody.
Gracias. Y eso, digamos, fue lo que se hizo. Los retos que quedan allí, pues básicamente es que al final la red creció tanto que no había la capacidad de distribuir a la demanda, ¿sí? No había como la persona que transportara, solo había una persona y como todo era voluntario, pues la persona al final se saturó, como no hay financiación, entonces se acabó la publicidad, sí, como que poco a poco se fue retomando a la normalidad y por ausencia de financiación para difusión y transporte de los productos, pues se limitó. Sin embargo, se mantiene y las huertas, sí, ellas sí continúan y ha sido creo que la mayor fuerza que ha tenido nuestro proceso. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Jody, to come up with a struggle. That is the struggle, not only adaptation, local adaptation by the women's power, but also it is a mitigation. And the painful thing is about financing. So people have to volunteer themselves that prove their dedication to the cause. Thank you again, Jody. Now I invite Alan Lunkuse of SCTADE from Uganda. You have 5 minutes, please.
All right. Thank you. I hope everyone is hearing me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to turn on my video, but my internet connectivity is very bad. So I hope you'll bear with me on that. Okay. All right, so I'll be sharing the story from Uganda, and our name is African Center for Trade and Development. It is called ACCCAD in full, but you were abbreviating ACCCAD. My name is Aden Bonkuse. I'm a programs officer at ACCCAD. So I'll be sharing a story of how the community that I work in was able to work around education issues, because for us in this country, the biggest issue that came with COVID-19 was access to education, and then the lockdowns that led to a lot of frustrations in households, violence in households, a lot of children getting employed in the informal sector because they wanted to cope with the effects of COVID-19. And so where I work, I work, and then groups of women. And I reached out and asked her, how are you coping? We were all at home. We were all locked down at home. So I reached out and asked her, how are you coping? How is my community coping? And she told me at the time the government had introduced some measures like provision of education materials, but then with the closure of schools, you could not tell whether people are getting the education materials. The parents are not literate enough to translate. They were in English. They could not translate the material, the contents of the material. So it just added to the frustrations, and then to the violence in the homes, and the children running away from homes from the violence. So at the time, the government did not even allow community gatherings. So there was really, people were just frustrated with everything. And I think it is a feeling that we shared across the globe. So to come up with ways of how to cope with the situation, one of the women that I work with, she reached out to the local leaders, and she informed them that we are not going to have children at the end of all this. We are not going to have school-going children. There will be no children in the homes. There will be no more homes. And then the moral decay would be just too much. So she organized, and then she capitalized on the volunteers who are in the community. There were teachers who were, of course, with the closure of schools, back at home. So she reached out to the ones she knew, and they started homeschooling. For us, it's not a very normal thing, homeschooling. And they also, that teacher now would invite a number of children at home, about 20 per class, from primary 1 to primary 7. And then she would teach them from home, and for like half day, and distract them from the chaos at home. And the ones who are now venturing into small businesses, really just being exploited. They decided to take on these children and teach them. And then the material that were being supplied by government were now used by this very organized group. And they were now using these materials to translate to the children, to explain to them, to mark them and give them feedback, so that their education growth can continue on even during the COVID-19
You have
pandemic.
1 minute, please.
Yeah, well, I would just like to break down the enabling factors. And I've been noting some of them, but enabling policy environment. If there's an enabling policy environment, then I think it is easier to cope with and to adapt to any change, even climate change. If there's a political will of the leaders, of the local leaders, if there is some level of organization in the communities, it is always easier to convince the powers that be to do something. And then the spirit of voluntarism in the communities. Yeah, and then according to them, economic power in the communities. If you can give them economic power, yeah, then that can help a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen, for the story of struggle and COVID struggle and COVID recovery. This is a story of alternative education, how volunteerism can keep continuing to cope with the COVID situation and the pandemic situation. I mean, so the thing is that always volunteerism is free to policymakers. For example, for me, I have been volunteering for more than 20 years for the policymakers. So I could understand the pain and joy from volunteerism. Thank you again, Ellen. Now I invite Mr. Dilwar Jahan of Prakritik Kishi from Bangladesh to say in brief that Dilwar is like hero to us. His movement, his struggle, and his stubbornness with his vision and with his ethics for making the movement and agricultural movement without chemical fertilizer or chemical pesticides, and put the agricultural product up to the consumer level, even in during the COVID pandemic situation. Now I invite Mr. Dilwar Jahan. Please try to express your pain and joy in 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Jakar bhai.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And I'm sorry to speak in Bangla. Are you allowed? Jakar bhai?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
আমি বাংলায় বলতেছি, এটা তো অন্যদের জন্য খুব ইয়ে হবে। আপনি কি পরেই করবেন সারমর্ম?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. করোনাকালীন সময় বাংলাদেশের কৃষক এবং আমাদের যে গ্রামীণ পর্যায়ে কৃষকদের যে লড়াই এবং করোনার সময় করোনা পরবর্তী, পাশাপাশি জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের যে অভিঘাত, সেই তিনটা বিষয়কে আমি টাচ করব। কোভিডের সময় যে সংকটগুলো গ্রামীণ কৃষকদের প্রয়োজন হলো, সেটা হচ্ছে বাংলাদেশে যে ধরনের কৃষি চর্চাগুলো কৃষকরা করে, তার উপকরণগুলো বিশেষ করে সার, রাসায়নিক সার, কীটনাশক, পেস্টিসাইড, নানা প্রকার ফাঙ্গিসাইড এবং কৃষি উপকরণ, অন্যান্য উপকরণ, সেগুলো সবই বাজার নির্ভর ছিল। মানে অন্য দূরবর্তী স্থান থেকে গ্রামীণ কৃষকদের কাছে আসতে হয়। তো কোভিড সিচুয়েশনে সেই পরিবহন ব্যবস্থাগুলো বাংলাদেশে প্রথম দিকে ধসে পড়ে এবং কৃষকরা নানা জায়গায় সার কীটনাশক সহ নানা ধরনের সংকটে পড়ে যায় এবং তারা এইটা সংগ্রহের জন্য যে এক প্রান্ত থেকে আরেক প্রান্ত, মানে এক গ্রাম থেকে অন্য গ্রামে অথবা গ্রাম থেকে শহরে যেতে পারেনি। এখন সেটা একটা প্রভাব ছিল, কিন্তু অন্য একটা দিন কোভিড ভালো করে দিচ্ছে যে প্রচুর মানুষ শহর থেকে গ্রামে আসছে এবং গ্রামে এসে গ্রামের যে কৃষি শ্রমের যে দুর্মূল্য ছিল, বিশেষ করে কৃষি শ্রম পাওয়া যেত না, এরকম শ্রমিকের সংখ্যা বেড়ে যায় গ্রামীণ কৃষি খাতে। সেইটা একটা পজিটিভ ছিল এবং পাশাপাশি মানুষ অন্য কাজ থেকে শ্রমটাকে করে বাঁচিয়ে, যেহেতু তার গ্রামেই থাকতে হয়েছে, তার গ্রাম অঞ্চলগুলোতেই, এবং সেই কারণে সে অনেক বেশি মনোযোগী হয় তার কৃষি ক্ষেত কামাই। এর কারণে কোভিড এর সময় আমরা কিন্তু বাংলাদেশের টোটাল কৃষি উৎপাদনটা বাড়তে দেখি। সেই সময় আসলে আমাদের মতো যারা আন্দোলন করে প্রাকৃতিক কৃষি নিয়ে, যারা রাসায়নিক সার, বিষ ছাড়া কিছু উৎপাদন করে, তাদের জন্য কোন ধরনের সংকট ছিল। আমরা যেহেতু খুব ছোট পরিসরে বাংলাদেশে কাজ করি, তো আমাদের এই কৃষকদের যা উৎপাদন হয় সেইটা একটু নিকটবর্তী শহর বা বড় শহরে নিয়ে বিক্রি করতে হয়, কারণ স্থানীয় পর্যায়ে এখনো সেইভাবে ভোক্তা গড়ে ওঠে নাই। তো যেহেতু আমরা গ্রাম অঞ্চল থেকে এই নিরাপদ খাদ্যগুলো শহরে, বিশেষ করে বাংলাদেশের রাজধানী ঢাকা শহরে নিয়ে যেতাম, আমরা প্রথমেই যে সংকটটা পড়লাম সেটা হচ্ছে যে গ্রাম অঞ্চল থেকে এগুলো সংগ্রহ করে ঢাকা শহরে নিয়ে যাওয়া পরিবহনের সংকট। পাশাপাশি ঢাকায় যে নিরাপদ ফসল যারা খাদ্য হিসেবে গ্রহণ করে, তারা বিভিন্ন জায়গায় ছড়ানো ছিটানো ছিল, আমরা রাজধানীর বিভিন্ন প্রান্তে। আমরা তাদের কাছে হোম ডেলিভারি দিতাম এবং এই হোম ডেলিভারিটা আমরা ঠিকঠাক মতো দিতে পারতেছিলাম না, কারণ নানা জায়গায় ব্যারিকেড ছিল, লকডাউন ছিল, রেড জোন ছিল। এই কারণে হোম ডেলিভারিটা আমাদের জন্য খুব কঠিন ছিল। এবং আমাদের যে ঢাকার যে বিপণন কেন্দ্র ছিল, যেটা আমাদের মার্কেটিং সেন্টার, সেই সেন্টারটার ওখানে রেড জোন থাকার কারণে আমাদের সমস্ত কিছু বন্ধ হয়ে যায় এবং আমরা আমাদের যে ঢাকার সেন্টার সেটাকে বন্ধ করে দিতে বাধ্য হই। তারপরে আমরা আমাদের ঢাকা শহরের নিকটবর্তী আমাদের যে প্রাকৃতিক কৃষি বায়োডাইভার্সিটি ফার্ম, সেখানে আমাদের সমস্ত স্টাফ গুলোকে নিয়ে আসি এবং সেখান থেকেই ঢাকা শহরের বিভিন্ন জায়গায় বাড়ি বাড়ি হোম ডেলিভারি দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করি এবং এখান থেকে তাদের প্যাকেজিং হয়ে ঢাকার বিভিন্ন বাড়ি বাড়ি এবং যে বাসা বাড়ি আছে সেখানে পৌঁছানো হয়। কিন্তু সেখানে পৌঁছাতে কিছু সংকট দেখা দেয়, কারণ ঢাকায় সেই সময় বিশেষ করে নিম্নবিত্ত যেসব পরিবারগুলো আছে, বস্তি অঞ্চল আছে এর কাছাকাছি, সেই সব জায়গায় সরকার এবং বেসরকারি ভাবে ত্রাণ দেওয়া হচ্ছিল, অর্থাৎ কোনো গাড়ি ঢুকলেই সেখানে মনে করা হচ্ছিল এটা ত্রাণ। এবং আমরা অনেক ক্ষেত্রে অনেক জায়গায় আমাদের পরিবারগুলোকে খাদ্য সরবরাহ করতে পারি নাই। এটার একটা কারণ ছিল যে ওই অঞ্চলের লোকজন কোনো খাদ্য পরিবহন গাড়ি দেখলে মনে করতেছিল যে এইটা হচ্ছে ত্রাণের গাড়ি, অথবা যে যার মতো করে লুট করে নিয়ে অথবা এখান থেকে জোর করে কোনো খাবার নিয়ে নেয়, এরকম নানা ধরনের ছিল। এর বাইরে পুলিশের তো এখানের সমস্যা ছিল, যে নানা জায়গায় আমাদেরকে ঢুকতে দেয়নি আমাদের খাদ্য নিয়ে। এইটা ওই সময়ের কিন্তু এর বাইরেও আমরা যেটা সচেষ্ট ছিলাম যে যে কোনো ভাবেই খাদ্যটা যেন খাদ্য সরবরাহ ঠিক থাকলে পরিবারগুলোর মধ্যে যে আতঙ্ক আছে সেই আতঙ্ক কিছুটা কাটবে এবং নিরাপদ খাদ্য যদি তারা পায়, তাহলে তাদের যে ধরনের স্বাস্থ্য ঝুঁকির কথা তারা ভাবছে, সেই স্বাস্থ্য ঝুঁকিটা অনেক অংশে কমে যাবে। এটা ছিল কোভিড এর সময় এবং কোভিড পরবর্তীতে। এর পরে আমরা যেটা বিশেষ করে কোভিড মধ্যে করলে, এবং আমরা একটু খুব লক্ষণীয় যে গত শীত মৌসুমে বাংলাদেশের বিশেষ করে আমাদের দেখা প্রায় 4টা জেলা, অন্য জেলাগুলোর খবর আমরা নিছি যেখানে ফলন বিপর্যয় ঘটছে সবকিছুতেই। যদিও এইটা আসলে আমাদের জাতীয়ভাবে সেভাবে স্বীকার করা হয় না, কিন্তু কৃষকদের যে অবজারভেশন সেটা হচ্ছে সবকিছুর ফলন কম হয়েছে, মানে লাউ জাতীয় ফসলের, সিম জাতীয় ফসলের, সবজি, কফি, ফুল, বাঁধাকপি, মানে সব ফসলের ফলনের বিপর্যয়। একটা প্রধান কারণ হচ্ছে কৃষকরা বলতেছেন যে এটার বিভিন্ন ধরনের জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের কারণে ফাল্গুন মাসে মানে বসন্তের শুরুতেই এখানে মানে গত বসন্তের শুরুতে মানে এই শীতের আগের সময় যখন এখানে চারাগুলো করা হচ্ছে, মানে চারাগুলো ছোট ছোট চারা হচ্ছে, সেই সময় মানে সবজির চারা, সেই সময় বৃষ্টি হয় এবং গাঢ় মানে গভীর বৃষ্টি। বিশেষ করে যে বৃষ্টিটা প্রত্যাশা ছিল না, হঠাৎ করে অনেক বৃষ্টিপাত হওয়ার কারণে শীতকালীন সবজির বীজ মারা যায় কৃষকের ক্ষেত্রে। এই কারণেই কফি জাতীয় ফসলের উৎপাদনটা একটু কমে আসে। এর পাশাপাশি আলু সহ অন্যান্য যেসব শীতকালীন সবজি সেইগুলোর উৎপাদনও কমে আসার কারণেই এবছরে কোনো সবজির বাজারে যেটা ঘটে যে দাম কমে যায়, সেই দামটা কিন্তু কমে নাই এখনো। প্রথম থেকে শেষ পর্যন্ত সব ফসলের দাম
Yeah, thank you, Dilawar. We got your point for the time being, and since we are sorry that we have time limitation, we will hear your story in details later. But I would like to summarize what you expressed from your struggle. That Mr. During COVID situation. There had been different problems in different level, especially those farmers who had to depend for chemical inputs from the market. The markets were closed, so they didn't have seed. They didn't have chemical pesticides or chemical fertilizers. In the meantime, Mr. Delwar and his team went to the farmers went to new farmers, the chemical farmers, that with organic fertilizers, organic pesticides, and organic seeds as well. So the production went well, but the problem was with the transport. Because everything was closed, the transports were not available, and the consumers in the capital were scattered. And there were also barricade, different zones, red zones, yellow zones, and something like that. So overcoming those problems, Mr. Delwar, they directly provide as a home service to the consumers in different way, different technique, so that consumers will feel satisfied to have the food, because all the markets were closed. But the other problem was when the car, when the pickup was going through the poor area, the slum area, people thought that it was a relief fund. So they had to give their products free to the poor people. He was not uh, sorry for that. So we find that Mr. Dilwar's struggle to ensure the products from farm to fork is crucial for adapting in COVID situation, the pandemic situation, and it is crucial to adapt and mitigate at the local level, at the farm level for the farmers. So we have come up with 4 stories from 4 countries of the globe from the local level. And behind the scene, Lucia definitely has some keywords in Padlet. So I would like to invite Lucia to present the main messages from our presenters, from our heroes. Back to you, Lucia.
You're on mute, Lucia.
Very sorry about that. Too much technology, too many buttons to press. Yes, I was just saying that I liked very much, Zakir, what you said about the factors that support climate resilience can also be called the joy, no? And those that block climate resilience action are more the pain. So, and I was also thanking some of you that have been contributing to the Padlet. So maybe just to go through some of the things that we heard of, like the joy of climate action on the ground is really enabled by leadership, specifically of women, for example. We heard about the importance of setting up these local level solidarity funds to really help one another. And somebody commented saying that that is crucial for sustainability. We talked about how important it is to learn from others. So, for example, in the first example, I think from Maria Eugenia, she talked about learning from other members of the SDI network about new methodologies or ways of working. Then also being creative in a way to find ways to meet basic needs. For example, we heard about the community gardens. I think in 3 of the examples we talked about this, which is was really crucial during COVID, but I think is just as crucial to adapt to climate, to reduce vulnerability, to increase resilience, and that can be done using areas that are empty plots. It can contribute to health by planting medicinal plants. Having organized groups like women's groups is crucial. Having informal meetings, because from those, we heard in the community gardens in Colombia, the women just started sharing what could be done. They decided to add value to some of their products, like make jam. So I think having these spaces where people come together leads to the generation of new ideas. Volunteerism, we really heard about that in a couple of occasions, I think, including from Zakir, and how you have been working tirelessly, I think, over many years. We heard from Ellen about the importance of the enabling policy environment, of political will. And I think from Delaware, we really saw an example of stubbornness and persistence. No, I think that is crucial. Like, we cannot give up in these situations, because yes, it's what determines our success and our survival in a way. And of course, like basic things like infrastructure, like transport, plays a very important role. Where it is more painful is where we see these situations of very low economic power and poverty, an absence of the enabling environment. Yes, an inability to meet one's own basic needs, or the need to first meet those and then be able to engage with these bigger issues. And the challenges tied to access to land and tenureship are very important. We heard that in the first example. Yes, this is where I will stop. But perhaps just to let me stop sharing, maybe just to mention about what we intend doing next. Zakir, would you like to?
Please, no, go ahead. You can.
Should I? Okay. Then yes, maybe for the next segment of the meeting, and also to enable you perhaps to talk in smaller groups, and hopefully to maybe ask a few more questions to the speakers. We wanted to split up into some breakout groups and develop some messages that we want to disseminate in the lead up to the COP. Mary mentioned some important moments both before in June and at the COP itself. And so we let me actually just again share my screen, because how this will work is that we want to develop messages in this way. We have prepared a very simple PowerPoint slide that each of the small groups can take one slide from. But the question is, what do you need from the COP decision makers to enable your actions on the ground? So we'd like the groups to, in about 20 minutes or so, develop 3 key messages. So what we need from you, decision makers, national governments, national delegations, etc., is the following. Like, what do you feel is needed? I mean, we've talked about some enablers, about some blockages from that are preventing like climate action on the ground from being successful, climate resilient action. So we'd like you to just discuss in small groups what you feel is some messages that need to be brought to decision makers. And then we can maybe talk later in the plenary about how to do that. But for now, it's mainly to just really develop these. So you'll see there are slides for different groups. I think we just need to look at how many participants. Let me also put here this is a link to the PowerPoint. I think we'll, to avoid problems of interpretation, maybe we can have the Spanish speakers. As far as I know, that is Maria Eugenia and Jody, myself. Anybody else who is a Spanish speaker, maybe you can put your name in the chat just so that we are all in one group and we can speak in Spanish. That will enable us to develop messages in Spanish. But otherwise, I think the groups could be of about 4 people each, Fahad, maybe. And we can be sent off to these groups and stay there, yeah, until maybe just after the hour. I know we're all in different time zones, but about 20 minutes.
Okay, so I will make the breakout groups for 20 minutes each and with 4 persons. And which ones should be the Spanish speakers? I see Maria, yourself.
And Jody.
Jody, okay, wait a minute.
And anybody else who speaks Spanish and who wants to join us, please let us know in the chat. Otherwise, you will all be in your English-speaking groups. So yes, just one moment until Fahad is able to allocate us. And then I hope you have been able to open the PowerPoint. If that is not convenient for you and you don't want to use a PowerPoint, feel free to just write down your messages even on paper, and then you can share them back with us either in the chat box or by using your microphone when we come back. So no worries about the technology if that does not work for you. Welcome back to everyone. Zakir, will you take us through the next part?
Yes, Lucia, all are in the main room?
I think so. I think everybody's back. Thank you.
Okay,
hello,
thanks.
Zakir bhai, everybody's back.
Yes. Yes, Fahad. Yes, Fahad, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to reconfirm that everyone is back. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back to the main session. So we have come up with different ideas what we want from COP decision makers. But the question is, do they really listen to us? I had been in 5 COPs, but I really doubt that do the COP decision makers really listen to the CSOs? Do they listen to the local people? I have doubt. Anyway, we have to be patient and be stubborn to stick up with the policy makers. So group 2, they have come up with 6 outcome. Shall I share my screen, Lucia? Or everybody has it?
As you would prefer, you can maybe share the screen so that people can see it. I also see that Kristen has raised her hand. So I don't know if you would like to take her input now.
Well, Christine was in my group. I think she has the input in our discussion.
Okay, then yes, please go ahead.
Group two has come up with 6 messages. One, climate financing mechanism should be prioritized or something like that, I think. 2, accessing climate finance at the community level. Youth engagement, involvement in COP discussion, ensure the youth concerns are heard at an international level. The final decisions do not reflect the youth voices. Youth are not recognized as unique, diverse, and are normally bundled under gender mainstreaming. A youth action program in the UNFCCC participation under 25 to 30 years old. Understand the youth interests for their career, education, contribute to climate solution. Thank you, Group 2, to emphasize the youth leaders to hear their voices in COP decision-making process. Group 3 has come up with 4 key messages. Number 1, international climate funding be allocated at the local level. Adaptation fund for women and youth-led organizations. Reduce growing inequality in infrastructure like electricity supply. Bridging the gap between communities and policymakers to ensure basic services, flood mitigation, and humanitarian support. So we have 3 groups output here. So how to formulate the messages properly in a policy language and channel the messages to the COP27 decision-making process through different networks, through constituencies, through COP26 and COP27 presidency, through SB 56. That is important because SB 56 is the place in Bonn in June where COP negotiation text or negotiation index is being formulated. So SB 56 is the focus point to go further up to COP27. Now I invite Mary with a special presentation from Ali Ibrahim. So the floor is yours, Mary.
Yes, I don't have too much to say apart from simply to hand to my colleague Ali Ibrahim, who is a finance specialist, and he's going to speak just now to some of the decentralized finance solutions which could potentially be mobilized by communities to help themselves. So over to you, Ali. It's my pleasure.
Thanks, Mary. I've been struggling this afternoon with stability of my Wi-Fi, so I'm gonna just turn my video off, and I hope that is fine. And I'm gonna just put up some slides. Could the host please enable screen sharing, as I am not able to at this moment to share my screen?
Highly sure. You can share the screen now.
All right. Just allow me 1 second. Right. Just 1 moment. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
I just need to get to the right. All right. So I'm just going to talk through the finance mechanisms or schemes that I've identified through a study I did related to the Voices of the Frontline stories. So the study was commissioned by CDKN to look into the innovative and sustainable financing mechanisms used by grassroots organizations, communities to respond to the COVID crisis. So it is specifically linked to the Voices of the Frontline stories, covering Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Although the examples of the finance mechanisms that I'm going to mention covered mostly the Asia and Africa region. I'm just going to move to the next slide. So before I dive into the actual mechanisms, I thought it would be useful to look at what the barriers were that were identified by the participants. Just to mention also that the study involved a process of interviews with participants and or interviewers of the Voices of the Frontline stories, and these slides are based on the responses from those that were interviewed. So I've categorized the barriers in terms of access to local funds into 5 areas, and they are regulatory, financial, social, market, and technology. In terms of regulatory, because the Voices of the Frontline focused predominantly on informal settlements and poor communities, the issue of lack of documentation and the lack of recognition of informal settlements was seen as a significant barrier to accessing finance, because without paperwork and recognition as a community, poor communities and people struggled to access finance. Even when it came to the humanitarian support provided by governments, those from informal settlements struggled to access the support efficiently because they're not recognized as would be formal communities. Secondly, in terms of financial aspects, lack of collateral was seen as a big barrier to accessing finance, as well as a lack of track record in terms of the traditional financing systems. In terms of the market, traditional financing is often too expensive for poor communities and informal settlements. And another aspect is that often the requirement in terms of funding is relatively small. So traditional funders find that providing finance in small amounts to a large number of people, the transaction cost is too high to invest that kind of time and effort. And in terms of technology, lack of access to reliable and affordable internet was seen as a barrier in terms of doing funding applications and or preparing proposals for funding in terms of local actors. This also is linked to a lack of digital literacy and access to digital tools such as mobile phones and so on, or shall I call it smartphones. And the last area was around social barriers. Language was seen as a barrier because often local actors struggle to put across their message clearly in terms of what their funding requirement is and what the funding is going to be used for. And also another area is the issue of restrictive gender-based norms. In many of the developing world, prevents women particularly from accessing finance because they don't own land, they don't have access to capital assets that they can use as collateral. There's also the stigma related to lack of financial literacy was quoted as a barrier to accessing finance. And of course, there is also the issue of corruption that prevent local communities and poor communities from accessing, or they shall call it the perception of corruption that also hinders access to finance. Now, I'm going to move quickly to what the examples of the financing approaches that were identified through this study of the Voices of the Frontline Stories. There were essentially 4 areas or mechanisms that were identified, and a number of these would be familiar to many of you. The first one was village savings schemes. This was seen as a key financing mechanism, especially to rural, poor, and informal communities. This particular mechanism is based on very much a participatory approach where strong relationships are essential, because when financing is provided between individuals or groups as they save money, there is this requirement for trust and accountability to each other. The second mechanism that was identified was a profit-sharing microfinance model. This is very similar to savings schemes, but it has a twist in the sense that instead of a traditional microfinance where interest is levied, this was a finance model where profits generated by individuals who participate in the microfinance savings scheme puts back some of the profits back into a revolving sort of facility for future participants or future savings groups to benefit from that. I will go into that in a little more detail in the next few slides. The third category was Kiva crowdfunding loans, and these are essentially impact investors that are based around the world, and they provide funding through loans, particularly to entrepreneurs across the globe, whether it's small businesses or individuals. And the fourth category was a particular intervention in South Africa, an NGO called Abba Limi Bezikaya, who assists small-scale farmers to provide them, or microfinance, to provide them with essential services, resources, and training in terms of also seeds and fertilizer, as well as training in sort of home gardening or small-scale farming, urban farming, shall I call it. I'm just going to move quickly to a little bit in terms of the going into a little bit of more detail into the different categories here.
I think you have 2 minutes, yeah. Please.
2 minutes, okay. So the village savings schemes, really, they rely on, it's sort of a revolving finance principle. It is led often by women group, and it serves as a form of safety net and a source of social solidarity during crisis events. Often these savings schemes during the COVID crisis was used to access finance for essentials during the COVID, such as food. But often these savings schemes, usually people save within these micro schemes so that they can have savings for essential expenditure, such as payments for school fees, medical expenses, or weddings, which are considered significant expenditures within sort of a family setup. But one of the enablers of these kind of schemes is that it is very flexible. During the COVID crisis, as I just mentioned, even though somebody would have been saving for a wedding or for medical expenses, they were able to access that funding very quickly to be able to buy basic foodstuffs. In terms of a traditional financier, if they are focused on a particular area, they wouldn't have been able to react so flexibly and quickly as required by the COVID crisis. In terms of the savings schemes, they address issues such as the gender issues by, women are able to come together, pool their money on a weekly basis and save money, which they can then other members of the group can then use that funding by obtaining a loan from the savings group. And through that process, you have this revolving finance available to participating members. Just in terms of the challenges that this addresses, it addresses issues such as the high cost of traditional finance, onerous collateral requirements, and the rigidity of traditional financing, as I just mentioned. I'm just going to quickly go into the Treasure Women Warriors was one of the examples in the Gambia, which is also based on a sort of a revolving credit facility mechanism. The only difference is that, as I mentioned before, is that part of the scheme is that members who participate have to reinvest 50% of the profits that they generated from loans that they received from the Treasure Woman Warrior microfinance scheme back into a sort of revolving facility where new member groups can then access that financing. And this idea of paying it forward to new groups of savers is really driven by this particular mechanism. And also in this scheme, loans are seldom offered to individuals. It's typically done in groups of individuals who work together on a particular project. And that is
thank you, thank you, Mr. Ali, for the alternative and innovative funding mechanism from the local level to the local level. So it will enable the local community to be a stakeholder for policy plan and actions. Since now they are considered only beneficiaries. So if a project fails, all the blames goes to the local people. Also, capacity building at donor side is also important. For example, they have to be capacitated with 3 key areas: where to fund, how to fund, and when to fund. That is important. Now we are moving to second phase. That is, we have the stories, we have the networks. So that's all. So finish. We go to home and have a good sleep. That we have done enough. We have raised our voice, but or we should continue to build up a network from these stories and with other participants in the meeting, so that we could move forward for the crucial factor of each of the struggle, that is funding. Fund is there, millions of dollars are there, billions of dollars there, but it is not reaching at the ground level. Those who are the sufferers, who are the victims, and who are struggling, who are solving the problems, global problems. So let us talk about fund. So how to fund, where to fund. Now I invite the audience, please raise your hand. Do you want to continue the network to be built up and to go for funding mechanism, to reach the funding mechanism, to convince them to fund the community as a network, because funding to the local level always and the policymakers, they say that local communities, they lack the capacity to finance. That is true. That is true. So being in a network, their capacity will be increased definitely. So I am inviting participants. The participants, please raise your hands and come forward with your idea. We are open. Yes, Mary. Go ahead, please.
Sí, yo quería decir que esta reunión ha sido el primer paso Y lo importante es construir algo colectivamente, ¿no? Si hay gente como la organización a la que estoy representando ahora, Tejiendo Ciudades, y tiene interés en vincularse, ¿no? En este grupo, que es lo que me han encargado las mujeres. Entonces sí nos interesa seguir conversando y construir algo colectivamente, ¿no?
Thank you, Maria, for the demand of collective actions. And next, I don't see any hands. So may I invite Mr. Paulus Mondal with your idea? If not, anyone else? I see Jody. Please go ahead.
Sí, desde Bogotá y Huerto Pilla también estamos interesados en generar y aportar a la red. Yo creo que los retos son muchos, sin embargo, las experiencias que se han mostrado hoy en este espacio nos muestran un camino, nos muestran un posible aprendizaje mutuo, ¿sí? Un intercambio de saberes, porque si esperamos a que los gobiernos tomen o nos escuchen, va a ser más lento. Tenemos que empezar a intercambiar experiencias entre nosotros y estamos dispuestos también a compartir la nuestra. Eso, a mí me encantaría aprender de la experiencia de María Eugenia, por ejemplo, para la red de economía que a nosotros se nos dificultó como mantener en el tiempo, ¿sí? Así como las experiencias de educación, que olvido en este momento el nombre, en África, cómo las mujeres se organizaron allí para atender la dificultad de la educación en la COVID. Entonces, creo que es muy valioso este espacio para aprender e intentar replicar y adaptar esas experiencias a nuestros procesos locales. Entonces, con mucha disposición estaremos allí.
Thank you, Jody, for your expression. Now, I think we have to come to near the end of our discussion of the event. Thanks all who are being participated, and thanks Gobeshona and ICCCAD, CDKN, South North, and Farmers Voice. Now I invite Mary of CDKN, and she's also research fellow of ODI, to express her concluding remarks with the event. The mic is yours, Mary.
Thank you very much, Zakir, and I'll be brief. We were all struck today by how much energy, innovation, and capability exist among community organizers, community-based organizations, and simply grassroots community members themselves, contributing so much in kind, in their own time and effort, without sufficient remuneration or financial support, to creating that community level resilience against COVID-19, climate shocks, and other shocks and stresses. And as Jody has just said so eloquently, there's no time to waste in sharing this knowledge with each other so that we can boost each other's morale and material efforts in creating even more resilience. And I just really want to second the comment that my colleague Lucia has made in the chat box, that CDKN, for our part, very much would like to keep working with you to facilitate dialogue. So we will share our email addresses in the chat, and we hope to follow up with you in the future. Also on the finance, which came out so clearly from the breakout group discussions, compared to the billions of dollars flowing in climate finance to low and middle income countries, not yet enough, I must emphasize, but still billions of dollars, and the trillions that flow in trade and investment flows, what gets to communities is barely discernible, is barely trickling down, as we've all said. And there is a sense, I sense a frustration in our discussions that communities' efforts are in some ways being taken for granted, and that governments and international institutions are not recognizing community members and organizations as the source of energy, innovation, capability and talent that they actually represent, and particularly young people in this picture. Even sometimes, we were saying in our breakout group, even sometimes they're viewed as a threat, as unemployed youth, an amorphous mass. They're not, they're a talent pool. They are the future, and the climate future is their future. So it really gives me incredible joy to be in this group of doers and shapers. And I think we have shown a resolve today that we're going to, whether it's in an informal way or a more formalized way, move forward on this together. So thank you so much to everyone for participating, and let's keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Mary, and thank you all. And special thanks goes to the people behind the scene. And also thanks goes to the translators who have provided our their rich experience. And thank you all. We will be on the road to happiness.